Hello everybody, this is Connor at BoatsDon'tSink, here with another Shadowverse Evolve deck profile. We're going a little out of order here in the classes. We're going to look at the Fable Haven deck from BP06. I know I've covered this one a few times in the past, however it has gotten a few updates in both BP05 and BP06 that I'd like to take a quick look at. In addition, this was the deck that I played at the Grand Showdown last weekend in Los Angeles. It was the North American Grand Showdown. Unfortunately, I was not able to make the top 32. I started off strong. I was, 3-0 going into round 4 and just hit some hiccups with the deck. Ended up with a 4-3 record, so not quite good enough to make it onto the bubble. But I think this deck is very powerful. I still think it was a great choice for the tournament. Sometimes it's just not your day for those kind of things. But before we jump into the list itself, yes, this is going to be the exact list I played. This is the list that I'm comfortable on. However, I do think that there are some sort of flex slots that you can swap in and out to your own preferences. There's a few things I'm playing that you wouldn't see in most lists, or at least wouldn't, maybe some things missing or changed around from normal lists that are plenty fine to do as you please with. But yeah, just a disclaimer. This is the list I played, and it's what I'm happy with. So here is the deck. The first thing you may notice if you haven't been keeping up with the sort of evolution of the Fable deck throughout the sets, basically every time a new set comes out, we get new good cards that are not Fable, and the number of Fable cards in the deck gets lower. So we take out Fable cards for good cards, but this is still the Fable deck. Our win conditions are still largely revolved around the Fable cards themselves, at least as a way to close out games, or just get so far ahead in games that we can't lose. It has developed more away from being a combo burn deck into being an aggro deck that has a combo burn top end. So that's why you're going to see, we play 9 1-drop 2/2s. We are definitely an aggro deck that wants to get in fast and start pressuring the opponent. Our curve is super low. It actually works out really well. We just always want to be sort of the aggressor in all these matchups. You can, of course, check out the deck log page using the link in the description or the code in the bottom right, 28C7S for this one. The Evo deck is pretty typical. The one slight difference, most people are going to be playing 3 Humpty Dumpty Evos. I've opted for a second Demon's Epitaph over the third Humpty Dumpty. Do with that as you please. I personally just found that I did not want to be drawing dead Epitaphs after I evolved the first one. And the third Humpty Dumpty only rarely came up in my testing. So our curve is, as I said, super low. We have 11 1s, 11 2s, 12 3s, and then only 3 4s and 3 5s. So basically our whole deck is 1 2 3, and it's a pretty even split between them. So it's actually really fairly consistent to open up like a 1 2 3 curve with the deck. We have 33 followers, 7 amulets. Most of those amulets are going to be ways to get us more bodies into play. Yeah, so pretty straightforward statistics for an aggro deck. Most of our guys are just followers that are beating in face until you get to sort of the 3-drop Fable follower package that we'll look at, where you start getting into your burn effects and sort of your combo part of the deck. Starting off, we have Actress Faria. So 1-drop 2/2 Fable card. You can engage it, select another Fable follower on your field, put a Fable counter on it. Basically, the only thing we use in the deck that even cares about Fable counters at this point is Tin Soldier, who can remove a Fable counter to deal 2 damage to any enemy. And of course, Alice has the ability to move Fable counters from herself onto any other Fable follower or into the EX area. So Faria will only ever be putting counters on either a Tin Soldier or on an Alice that's moving them to an EX area Tin Soldier. She's essentially just here to be, if we open up with her, she's an aggro, just 2/2 Goblin. Or if we draw her later in the game, she's a source of Fable counters to get our Tin Soldier extra burns. We play 3 copies of Andromeda. This is a Havencraft 1-drop 2/2. We did have this one last time we talked about the deck. This was kind of one of the biggest upgrades to the deck that made it not just an absolute nightmare to ever actually use Humpty Dumpty. Fanfare for the rest of this turn, your leader and each follower currently on your field, including this one, have this doesn't take ability damage. So the one big thing, since we are in an aggro deck, and we are in a format with Kuon, especially the D-Shift Rune deck, we can use this to stop quick timing spells. So if we play Andromeda before we start declaring our attacks, our opponent's Angelic Snipes and Surefire Bullets won't be able to take out our followers. Essentially meaning if our opponent held up any play points for removal, we have made them waste an entire turn, since they won't be able to use that removal on our followers. The other big thing it does for us, of course, is allow the Humpty Dumpty Evo to go off without board wiping ourselves. Humpty Dumpty's evolution deals 5 damage to every follower, both yours and your opponent's, but if you've played Andromeda that turn, your followers can't take ability damage, and therefore don't take the 5 from the Humpty Dumpty evolution. Which allows you to, play an aggro game plan where you build a wide board, and then not lose it if you ever have to evolve Humpty Dumpty to answer your opponent's board, or just push more damage. Our last 1-drop follower is, of course, just Goblin itself, 1-drop 2/2. It evolves for 4, we don't play the Evo, that's way too expensive, doesn't really help us much. This is just another 1-drop that we can open on turn 1, arguably the best one to open on turn 1, since it's the only one that doesn't have utility later. It just pads out our 1-drop count, so we can get up to 9 1-cost followers to make our Fina a little more consistent. The last 1-cost card we play is Pinion Prayer. This card saw play in the decks earlier on. It's mostly come out at this point. However, I found that I played a few too many cards that were slow and kind of breaking the deck, especially when I was trying to get aggressive starts. Those namely being Alice's Adventure and Odette, the White Swan. Which most of these lists are going to be playing 3 Alice's Adventure, 1 Odette. I cut the 3rd copy of Alice's Adventure and the 1 copy of Odette for 2 Pinion Prayers. This card is quite good in my experience. It's another card that you can play on turn 1 to get you above that 9 1-drop count. Getting up to 11 means you're a little more consistent on at least having something to play turn 1, even if it doesn't really push damage immediately on turn 1. But it also gives you something to do on turn 2. So it's a 1-cost amulet. You can pay 1 engage and sack it to summon a Holy Falcon, which is a 3-cost 2/2 storm. This means we can play it on 1 if it's our only 1-drop. Gives us an additional turn to draw a 1-drop, so potentially on turn 2, we could play the new 1-drop we've drawn and crack this to attack our opponent for 2. Or it can be the 2 of our curve. We can play a Goblin turn 1, then play Pinion Prayer on turn 2 and attack with both the Goblin and the Falcon to get in 4 damage on turn 2. The other thing I really like about this card is that it is a 1-drop that you can play on turns where your Humpty Dumpty does not have Andromeda backing it up, and you won't lose the body. You can just play the Pinion Prayer, then crack the egg, crack the Pinion Prayer afterwards to get your Falcon, and you'll still have Falcon after you've board wiped everything. Demon's Epitaph is our first 2-drop. This is a new card that we got in BP05 that we haven't looked at yet. This card does wonders for the aggro side of the deck. It's a 2-cost 2/3 with an evolve ability costed quite uniquely. It evolves by discarding a card instead of paying play points, which means that going first, you can still evolve this card on turn 2. It evolves into a 3/4 with Bane, and the ability Last Words deal 2 damage to each enemy leader. Having a 3/4 on turn 2 going first on its own is so incredibly powerful. It can single-handedly swing the tide of games. And then in addition, it punishes your opponent for removing it with like a Surefire Bullet or something by dealing 2 damage to them anyway. It gets even worse if they allow it to live a turn and be able to actually attack for 3 and then they remove it, because then they're taking a total of like 5 damage from your 2-drop, which is insanely good value. The Bane text is really good for clearing big wards, since of course this is an Evo that can come down and swing the turn you play it. Playing it on turn 2 or 3 to answer 4 defense followers like Fairy Dragon or Saintly Leader with the Bane effect can clear the way for your 1 and 2 drops, your other 1 and 2 drops to get into face, while your opponent might have thought they were safe behind a big ward early game. In the late game, it's also just nice because, you know, your opponent Death's Breath's like an Israfil and wards it or whatever. You can just send a Demon's Epitaph into it and answer it, and you're fine. You're good to go. Once you crash in, you'll deal the 2 damage to your opponent anyway, so you're getting a little bit of face chip damage while you're also answering whatever their giant thing on board is. So overall, this card is just really powerful. However, because the front side has no text other than the Evolve ability, that's part of the reason why I decided to up it to 2 copies of the Evolve instead of the 3rd copy of Humpty Dumpty. Basically, I don't want late game, especially after I've used Humpty Dumpty and I'm top decking my draw every turn. I don't want to draw a Demon's Epitaph and I've already used my only copy of the Evolve and just not be able to do anything with it. I would much rather be able to play it and evolve it and get that little bit of extra, maybe 2 damage from Last Words once again, or just Bane to clear something, is much more valuable than me drawing a 2-3 that I have to play and pass. The next 2-drop we play is Fina, Dynamite Daredevil. This is another card from BP05. It's a 2-cost 3-2, very aggressive stat line. Fanfare, choose one of the following. Option 1, we can look at the top 5 cards of your deck. Reveal a follower that costs 1 play point, add it to hand, put the rest on bottom in any order. That's going to be able to add any of our 1-cost 2/2s. This makes it a pretty powerful curve against some of the like mid-rangey or even control like removal decks where we play a 1-drop and then play a Fina to find another 1-drop. It can also mean that our curve can end up being like 1-drop on 1, 2-drop on 2, and then turn 3 we play Fina, find a 1-drop, play it again. And then we get a 2+1 on 3. That's honestly probably better against a lot of the decks like D-Shift, the Kuon deck, just because a lot of their removal is single target, and going wide is more effective at getting damage through against them than going tall, since they're able to answer like 4 defense followers pretty easily, but two defense followers is a lot harder. This is also just nice in general for setting up Humpty Dumpty turns, since it is a dig top 5 to find Andromeda. You'll find yourself playing this card on like turn 5 or 6 sometimes, in addition to a second card, just to dig for an Andromeda to set up a big Humpty play on the next turn. The other option, option 2, is to select an enemy follower that costs 1 play point on the field and destroy it. This is great in aggro mirrors, especially if you go first. You play a 1-drop, they play a 1-drop, you play a Fina to pop their 1-drop, whether it's Iron Wrought Defender, Disciple of Lust, whatever it is they play. Now you have 2 bodies on board, they have 0 going into their turn 2, which also means probably whatever they play is not going to be able to attack immediately, since most of these decks aren't playing a ton of 2-drops that evolve. Outside of maybe Abyss is playing things like Vite or Demonic Hedonist, they might be able to swing into your 1-drop, but you're still staking quite a bit of damage on board that they have to find an answer to, and answering the one thing they've already played. It's just huge for developing board. Even going second, it can be very powerful just to help stabilize and keep up when your opponent is able to commit to board first. So overall, very powerful card. The last 2-drop follower we play is Minyu. This is a card from set 1 that never really saw much play, but I think in this meta in particular is quite well positioned. It's a 2-cost 2/2 with Aura, which basically just means it's immune to most forms of removal in the early game. Your opponent has to put a body into it. Aura, making it unable to be selected by abilities, means that your opponent's removal spells, like Surefire Bullet, aren't going to be able to target it. And follower abilities like Curse Crafter, sacking an Onmyoji to deal, or I'm sorry, sacking a Shikigami to deal 4 damage, is not going to be able to target it either. This makes Minyu very difficult to answer on the turn it comes down, since it's going to be reserved. It'll almost always get to swing in at least once to deal some damage, and if they can't answer it efficiently on that turn, it may even get to come in a second or third time to deal damage. This card pretty much single-handedly can save your Kuon D-Shift matchups, since they have to draw one of their followers to swing into it early, and even Curse Crafter, only evolving into a 3/3, has to trade 1-for-1 with the evolved form, which means you're just going a lot like play point positive against them in terms of how much threat you're putting out. Minyu does evolve for 1 into a 3/3. We only play 1 copy of the Evo, since the base form, the 2/2, has Aura anyway. Drawing them late game is not completely dead. We can still just play them as goblins that can't be removed by effects, basically. This is a slot that is one of the flex slots in the deck, and one I was kind of going back and forth on for a little while. I eventually settled on Minyu because I think the D-Shift matchup is relevant, and I think this card still has some game in the aggro matchups where your opponent might be playing, say, a Mach Knight and evolving it. You can prevent them from targeting Minyu with Mach Knight's effect, or anything like that. The other option that I'd really be looking at for this slot is Phantom Blade Wielder, which is from set 6. It's a 2-cost 2/2, evolves for 1 into a 3/3. On evolve, deal 2 to an enemy follower. It's basically just the anti-aggro version, whereas Minyu is the anti-control version. Dealing 2 on turn 2, especially going second, allows you to just clear off your opponent's 1-drops, clear off your opponent's 2-drops even sometimes if they're playing things like Fina. And it also has the ability to deal 2 at the start of your end phase if you have 2 open play points. There is a deck entirely based around abusing these kinds of effects. You're not going to see it come up as often in the Fable deck, since you'd rather be spending your play points to develop your board every turn. But just the ability to have a 3/3 that deals 2 on Evo and can swing in to sort of stabilize and clear out the board against aggro decks can be very good if you're playing against a lot of like Sword or Aggro Abyss in your meta. That might be better for you than the Minyu. The last 2-cost card we play is Alice's Adventure. This is typically a 3 of in the deck. I've cut it down to 2, just because the games where you're trying to develop fast boards to pressure your opponent, having to take a turn off to play this because it's the 2-drop you drew is quite awkward. Fanfare, search your deck for a Fable card, reveal it, add it to your hand. This is fantastic for just searching like Alice or Martyr's Tea Time on curve to be able to curve out into them. Or in the late game, which is honestly rather when you would see this, which is why I've cut it down to 2. You can search Pinion Prince, you can search Humpty Dumpty, really you can just search whatever you need in that exact moment. It's a very good toolbox card. That's just always going to get you, of course, the best option for the situation you're in. It also has activated ability. You can pay 1, engage it, send it to Cemetery, select a Fable follower on your field, and give it Rush and Assail. This line of text doesn't seem super relevant at first glance, but it does actually end up mattering a lot, giving things like Alice or even Tin Soldier Assail to trade into reserved followers that your opponent played, hoping to set up big turns where they can either answer your board or just start generating enough resources to grind you out of the game. Being able to answer those things immediately can keep you a lot more in the game and push out their strategy. Moving into our 3-drops, this is where we really start to see the majority of the Fable cards. We have Alice, Wonderland Explorer, the sort of main forefront Fable card. 3-cost 3/3, Fanfare, put a Fable counter on this card. Activate ability, you can remove a Fable counter from it to put a Fable counter on a Fable follower on your field or in your EX area. So you can essentially just move counters from her to your other things. She evolves for 1 into a 4/4. On evolve, look at the top 4 cards of your deck, put up to 2 Fable cards from among them into your EX area, put the remaining cards on the bottom in any order, and then she still has the same activated ability. Of course, this is going to be finding the same cards as Alice's Adventure. This is basically just a way to keep card advantage going, and since we're using the EX area, if we ever evolve Humpty Dumpty and have to discard our hand, we still have access to those cards afterwards. So Alice is mainly here as a way to just build up a lot of resources, so that we can continue playing the game after a Humpty Evo. In addition, she has a 4/4 body. If the opponent doesn't answer her immediately, she's going to swing in for reasonable amounts of damage. She's good at trading into enemy followers if you're sort of on the back foot in an aggro matchup and need to start trading just to stabilize board. And, of course, she gets a counter on enter and can move it to anywhere you need. This is great if you hit a Tin Soldier off of her top 4 check and put it in the EX area, because you can just move the counter off of her onto the Tin Soldier, and that stores up 2 damage for later once you play the Tin Soldier. She's also good, like, mid-game or whatever, if you're able to have enough play points to get a Tin Soldier out, and then either play an Alice or use a Tea Time to bring an Alice back, just to provide 2 extra damage onto a Tin Soldier, while also getting a body that sort of progresses your board state. The next follower we play at 3 is a new card from set 6. This is the neutral legendary BP05. This is a 3-drop 2/3, slightly low on the stat line, but it's worth it when you look at all the effects it has. Fanfare, choose one of the following. Option 1, select another follower on your field and give it +1/+1. Option 2, give your leader +2 defense. Or option 3, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, put any number of them on the top of your deck in any order, put the rest on the bottom in any order. So all 3 of these modes actually have relevance in this deck. Generally, I would say the vast majority of the time, you're going to be choosing option 1, which is to give a follower +1/+1. This is especially powerful with Mine You, because you can pump the aura body that's already hard to answer, because it can't be targeted, make it even bigger, make it even more awkward for your opponent to trade followers into, and just get to stick extra damage off of it. Since, if you play a Mine You on turn 2, and then you play a BF05 on 3, you're able to swing with the Mine You and just get that extra damage in immediately. Some matchups, very few, you'll choose the +2 defense. This is mainly in aggro matchups where you got pushed early and need the defense to be able to stabilize a little better as you start to turn the corner, maybe especially after a Humpty Dumpty turn. The last option is really here for if you have not gotten a good setup with either an Alice EX area or getting tea times into play, but you know that you're going to have to Humpty anyway, or you have just Humptied and draw this card. You can look at the top 3 and put any cards you don't want to be drawing on the bottom, and try to find more like Alice's or tea times or whatever on the top of your deck to refuel and keep going from there. BF05 also evolves for 2 play points into a 4/5, which is a very powerful stat line. Makes this card very worthwhile, hard to answer once you do evolve it. It again allows you to choose between 3 modes on evolve. Option 1 is to engage each enemy follower on the field. Option 2 is to deal 2 damage to the enemy leader. And option 3 is to put the top card of your deck into your EX area. Unlike the base form, the evolve pretty much only has one option that you're ever going to be picking, and that's going to be dealing 2 damage to each enemy leader. Every now and then, there will be a scenario where you want to engage each enemy follower on the field. Say, for example, your opponent played a Karula and evolved it and has the 4/4 Karula that's going to just be able to sit there and generate massive advantage as the game goes on. In that case, you could engage it, swing into it. You're a 4/5 body, which means you're going to be able to kill 4/4s and survive and force your opponent to still find answers to it. The option 3, putting the top card of your deck into EX area, is almost never going to come up. You would think that in a deck like this, where your 10 soldiers and things benefit from being in EX area, and you're already filling your EX area with good cards, that would be sort of a welcome addition. But it really just doesn't come up. It doesn't help you very much. Drawing 1 card is not something you need when you already have like Alice and Tea Time and all doing it for you in a better way, especially at the cost of either good removal or 2 damage to your opponent's face. Next 3-drop we play is Humpty Dumpty, the guy, the egg, 3-drop 3/3 Evo for 0 into a 4/4. You gotta ask what's the catch, and of course, on evolve, you deal 5 to each follower on the field. That is your followers and your opponent's followers. You deal 3 damage to each enemy leader, and then you discard your hand. So this card is a fantastic board wipe. It's a great way to stabilize against mid-range decks and aggro decks. You can just jam this guy down, pay 0 to evolve him. He's basically always live. 3 is so early. Your opponent always has to sort of beware playing down a wide board, because Humpty will answer it. Burns your opponent's face, which means in the late game, even if you don't care about clearing board, you can just use this for 3 additional damage to face for 3 play points, or even 2 play points if you're getting it back off of a tea time, which essentially makes it a demonic strike. And discarding your hand as the game goes on will be almost a negligible downside, because you'll be so low on hand anyway, or just have 0 hand anyway. And then, of course, this works especially well with Andromeda, because Andromeda makes it so all your followers don't take damage. So you can just crack the egg, deal 5 to everything. All of your opponent's followers will take the 5, but your followers won't, which allows you to, again, as I said earlier, set up these aggro boards where you're going wide and attacking with a lot of followers, and then not getting punished when you have to wipe your opponent's board that's pressuring you back. And of course, this is a card that we can just sort of keep recurring and finding off of Alice and Marchair's Tea Time to set it up. March Hare's Tea Time especially, because once we've cracked the first egg, we're able to sack the Tea Time to get it back and go again whenever we need to clear board. Both of these cards are also great for guaranteeing that we have ways to keep playing the game after we use Humpty Dumpty to discard our hand, since Alice can get us EX area, and March Hare's Tea Time, being an amulet, won't be destroyed by Humpty's Evo effect. These both mean that we can just keep playing the game, keep finding more cards to keep going after we discard our hand. Tin Soldier is the last 3-drop we play. This is sort of the combo burn aspect of the deck. He's a 3-drop, 3/4 Fanfare. If he is put onto the field from anywhere other than your hand, put a Fable counter on him. That's either going to be deck or EX area or cemetery. We have plenty of ways to get him in from all of those areas. And then activated ability, we can remove a Fable counter from him to deal 2 damage to an enemy leader or enemy follower on the field. So we have plenty of ways to get that Fable counter. Either Feria can give him the counter, or Alice can move a counter to him. Alice can put him in EX area to bring him in. March Hare's Tea Time can bring him in from deck, or sack itself to bring him in from cemetery. And then, of course, Pinion Prince. Fanfare can put the Tin Soldier into your EX area with a counter already on it. So then it'll enter with a second counter. All of this is basically how we want to win some of the longer games where our just jam all the aggro guys strategy doesn't work. We can get a Tin Soldier into our EX area and just sort of stockpile a bunch of counters on it. You can quite often get a Tin Soldier to anywhere from like 3 to 5 counters, and that represents 6 to 10 burn damage. Since you've already been pressuring as an aggro deck and have things like Humpty Dumpty to burn your opponent, 6 to 10 damage is usually plenty to end the game. Our only 4-cost card, it's a 3 of Amulet, March Hare's Tea Time. Fanfare, look at the top 5 cards of your deck. You may put a Fable follower that costs 5 or less from among them onto your field. Put the remaining cards on the bottom of your deck in any order. That's going to be able to find us really any of these. Obviously Feria too, that one's not really what we want to see off the top. Any of our 3 or 5 drops are plenty fine though. Even though we're getting technically less value than we're paying for on the 3 drops, it is able to give us things like Tin Soldier's extra Fable counter, which means 2 damage to face. Alice can come in, and if you have an extra play point or an Evo point, you can evolve her immediately and just start setting up very well. Or Pinion Prince is one of the best just sort of stat sticks to get off of March Hare's Tea Time. Since again, if you have a play point or Evo point, he can Evo. This is especially powerful if you play it on turn 4 and get Pinion Prince, since you'll essentially get a 6 play point, like 5/6 follower on turn 4. That can be very good for continuing to push damage, or just assail to remove an enemy follower. So all these are great targets. And then, in addition, one of the other reasons you don't really care about only getting a 3-drop off your 4-cost Amulet, you can pay to engage and sack March Hare's Tea Time to select a cost 3 or lower Fable follower in your cemetery and put it onto the field. This is basically going to be the same selection of followers, minus Pinion Prince, and Feria might be the one you're choosing to bring in slightly more often than you'd rather see it off the top at least. Usually this is still either going to be Tin Soldier to burn your opponent out, Alice to draw more cards or get more counters for your Tin Soldier, or Humpty Dumpty to board wipe and or burn your opponent. So very flexible card. It's pretty much the most toolboxy card in the deck that lets you just do whatever you want whenever you want, both it and Alice's Adventure. The last card we play is Pinion Prince, 5-drop 4/5. Fanfare, select a Fable card in your cemetery, put it into your EX area. You may put a Fable counter on it. This is pretty much here for Tin Soldier getting additional counters, but if you need more resources, you can always get Alice or March Hare's Tea Time. And if you really just need to have an egg in the back in case your opponent goes wide, you can of course get Humpty Dumpty as well. Pinion Prince evolves for 1. It's not really crucial to the deck's strategy. He evolves into a 5/6 with Assail. This is a good removal option, just to be able to take out X5s and even keep your Pinion Prince alive. The 6 defense notably means he will survive a Humpty Dumpty evolve as well if you don't have Andromeda. So good card all around. It is worth having the 1 of evolve as an option here. Looking at the deck as a whole, I think it's a very powerful deck. A lot of synergy between the cards, a lot of good aggro strategy, and longer game resource burn strategy. So you're able to play sort of a flexible game plan to win whichever matchups you need. The pros of the deck, obviously, the fast aggro curve with ways to refuel mid-game using cards like Alice and March Hare's Tea Time. Large amounts of uninteractive burn damage coming from both Tin Soldier and Humpty Dumpty throughout the game, and even through BB05's evolution ability. And you have recursive threats that give you a resilient endgame, since even if your opponent is able to remove your Tin Soldiers and Humpty Dumptys, you can use March Hare's Tea Time and Pinion Prince to keep bringing them back from the cemetery over and over again. The cons, however, you do struggle to get through large amounts of healing in the mid to late game. If your opponent is able to combine like healing with either establishing a board or removing your followers, it can be very hard to rebuild enough to push your opponent while also overcoming the healing and answering whatever followers they're putting on board. This is especially apparent in versions of like the D-Shift Kuon deck that are able to fire off multiple concentrations in a row and gain like 9 to 12 defense. It can be very hard to just find enough like Fable counters for a Tin Soldier or enough Humpty Evos to get through all that extra life gain. The other issue is that you can lose some consistency once you're in top deck mode post Humpty. You really don't want to be cracking the egg if you don't have to. And you definitely want to try to make sure you have either an EX area set up or March Hare's Tea Times ready to go to refuel you the moment you do have to discard your hand. You definitely don't want to be caught out in the open just hoping you draw a good card for turn. One of the other issues that's less prevalent but comes up occasionally, you are pretty weak to banish removal. Thankfully, you have a lot of followers with 4 defense that kind of dodge things like Blackened Scripture. But if they take a little bit of chip damage or your opponent has Acolyte's Light, your Alices and Tin Soldiers can get banished, which means you won't be able to bring them back off of Tea Time or Pinion Prince. And that can actually prove to be a relatively large problem for winning the game. Looking at the deck again as a whole, why did I choose to take it to the Grand Showdown? Basically, I did not want to play Kuon Mirrors all day long, reasonably enough. So I decided to play an aggro deck. I was originally on some of the control decks, but felt they were just a little too slow or a little too cloggy on some of the higher end parts of their curve. Control Abyss in particular, drawing things like multiple Gensetsus, Israfils, and Death's Breaths early on, that you're just not able to utilize well enough to stabilize against aggro decks. So I just wanted to be the aggressor. I wanted to be the deck pressuring my opponent, making them have the answers. Especially since a lot of the decks aren't going to have enough answers for something this powerful. D-Shift is kind of the one deck that can have the answers to it, but they still need to draw Curse Crafter pretty desperately to be able to consistently answer. In like my round 3 game, I played against D-Shift and was able to kill it turn 5 going second even through their Curse Crafter. Just because I opened a really powerful curve that was like Minu into Bivka Evo into just Humpty for game. They couldn't answer the Minu, so it got in for like 2 or 3 attacks, and that was kind of all it took. The other thing is that this deck is... so it's very powerful. It's aggro deck. It gets under D-Shift. It is good against the other aggro decks, I think, because you have Athena, you have Demon's Epitaph, which can trade positively, since most things they're playing early enough aren't going to have 4 attack to like actually trade back into it. You'll kill them and they'll still have to answer it. And of course you have the Humpty Andromeda plays to just board wipe them and be infinitely ahead on board and able to close out the games. So it's good into D-Shift because you can get under them. It's good into aggro because you have more board answers than they do. And frankly, your burn is just better than whatever they're doing. So good matchups all around. Kind of the only issue is if you have to go into top deck mode and don't find good things, or if you just don't curve out properly, which is unlikely, but this is a trading card game. It can always happen. One of my rounds that I lost, I drew 10 of my 11 1-drops, which is just, you know, a freak accident, but it happens. We do play a game with a random nature. And of course, I had one where the mulligan was questionable. I opened Andromeda double Humpty Alice. It was a matchup where I thought I might need the Humpties, so I didn't want to mulligan them to the bottom of my deck. I was going first. I did not end up drawing a 2-drop, and then ended up missing a top 4 check on Alice and finding no Fable cards. Which, again, as I mentioned early at the beginning of the video, we are cutting down on the number of Fable cards in the deck for other aggro options. So that is one of the downsides, is you're going to miss every now and then. My personal stance on the fact that we're cutting down and opening up this possibility of missing is that the cards we were playing before are not particularly good cards anyway. Things like Snow White. So I don't actually care if I'm like missing versus grabbing a Snow White. To me, those are basically the same thing. That 2/2 body wasn't really going to help me win the game that much. It really just comes down to, I want my Alice to be finding me a quality card, not just cards in general. I want it to be finding me a Tin Soldier. I want it to be finding me a Tea Time, a Humpty, another Alice, anything like that. So yeah, overall, I think this deck is super powerful, good matchups. It is a little on the RNG side. You have to be open to playing something like that, but I think it's worth it. I think this deck will continue to be pretty strong throughout the upcoming metagames, especially as it gets to deal with more aggro decks. Again, here's the Evo deck. If you really think you're going to need the 3 Humpties, you can swap those in over the second Demon's Epitaph Evo. Or you can cut the Minus altogether for the Phantom Blade wielders if you're going to be playing more aggro matchups than you are D-Shift matchups, or maybe even Control Abyss matchups. And, of course, the deck log code at the bottom, 28C7S, or in the link in the description. Thank you for watching. This one got a little bit long-winded since I wanted to talk a bit about my Grand Showdown experience. This deck is honestly not something I was super open to playing early on. I played a little bit back in set 3, and the RNG aspects turned me off big time. But in the weeks leading up to the Grand Showdown, I was talking to Vanguard content creator and Shadowverse player, Outer Orange. You should go check her out. She's been playing a lot of Fable Haven, topped the Duluth BSF on it, and put me onto the deck and answered a lot of the questions I had and helped me with that. So big shout outs there. Really kind of sold me on the deck as one of the good aggro decks of the format, and I'm happy with how it performed, despite not top 32ing. I think the deck is great. I think you should still give it a try. Going into the CP02 format, I don't think it's going to be a whole lot different from BP06. A lot of the same decks are going to be relevant, so this deck probably still has life left in it. Thank you for watching. We'll have some more videos out soon. In the meantime, there should be some on the screen for you to watch now. We'll see you next time.